looks like we are live. Good evening, everyone. We have so much to talk about. Of course, we're keeping an eye on the Mets, see if they actually win a game this week. We'll see. They're kind of hitting a little bit of a issue there. So, of course, I'll be keeping an eye on that. We have a lot to talk about, though. Uh, where to begin? Well, okay. So this is the topics we're going to cover. Just so you know, in case you're new, we'll go over all the topics. I'll break down my thoughts on everything from the rainstorm that's going to be impacting us to the summer forecast and the tropical forecast I've put out. Now, I may not be as good as some because I'm not the best in the world, as some might claim. But we're going to go over that. And of course, we're going to take your questions. Of course, everyone in the premium discussion, in the premium chat room, will get all their questions answered. And I usually pick the best ones out of social media. We'll see how that goes. Of course, Susan is here to help out. Susan, say hi. Hello, there we go. And now, where to begin? Okay, so first, book of the week. This may not be a meteorology book, but I want to tell you why this is very important. Business plan kit for dummies. Okay, I started using this when I was a lot younger. It was version one, I think. This is volume probably third edition. Yeah, but you know, any one of these type of books, business plan books. Okay, very important. You might be saying, Stephen, I'm looking for a meteorology book. But you are looking to build your career. Whether you want to be a meteorologist, an accountant, a someone working in the trades, anything of that nature. The one thing that you should teach yourself, because God knows they're not teaching it in high school, is how to write your own business plan. Now, you may not be looking to open a business, but it's a good way to basically treat your career and your brand. That's what you represent when you go to work, when you get promotions and whatnot, and build an idea for yourself. Now, you what I do is I update this every year, sometimes every 6 months, depending on what's going on. I'm using it now to launch some very fun and interesting businesses on the way in the future. Trust me, it's going to be fun. But I would say if there was one thing I would have loved to have learned when I was a freshman in college or as a senior in high school would be how to build a proper business plan for yourself and how to plan for the future. Not that you'll be able to predict everything, but I think one of the primary problems with a lot of graduates coming out is that they have this vision of the type of salary that they'll make based on the college loan that they have, and they don't plan properly. So, for example, when I was going into meteorology, I had the understanding that I would not be driving a Maserati, that I would not be able to own a four-bedroom house very easily, that initially I'm going to have to struggle because salaries coming out for meteorology ranges anywhere between 20 and 40,000 depending on what you're going to be doing, and then you build from there, you grow from there. So I don't think that without the planning I would have survived. I certainly wouldn't have paid off my student loans. So this is always a good thing. I always like to prepare anyone who is young and watching this channel and this chat that we have, that yes, definitely getting all your meteorology books and getting the latest things are very important, but along with learning all your equations, learn your value and learn how to plan for it and learn how to plan for failure and success. That way, if you don't get the job you love, at the very least, you don't get blindsided by it, right? So that way you can prepare for all the ups and downs that is life to the best of your ability. And also get yourself a savings account when you're 18. Trust me, you'll thank me later. So, that is the book of the week. We'll go back to meteorology books as we go forward, but we have to talk about something unfortunate. And let me just share what that unfortunate thing is. Oh, AccuWeather, how I love thee. If I know that if I want to know what I could talk about in terms of controversial topics, you can always count on AccuWeather to pull up some questionable um, statements. Okay, so AccuWeather via Kantar study confirms that AccuWeather provides the most accurate hurricane forecast in 2024. Now, who's Cantor? Well, wouldn't you know? Cantor is not a science-based study group. No, 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 no. They are a PR group. So this is, I'll give you an example, okay? Because I've dealt with PR groups, right? Now, PR groups usually are not going to put out a study or a statement or a press release saying our client is horrible or our client did made a mistake in this location. No, no, no. They want to pump you up. That's what PR firms are for. Okay. So the Cantor study, a third party study, is not really a third party study because AccuWeather is paying them to provide positive news. So for one, and I would definitely suggest reading Dr. Levi Cohen's Cohen, pardon me, um, tweet or X post about this. You can find it under Tropical Tidbits. So at Tropical Tidbits on X, he breaks this down beautifully, better than I could have. So especially on how they analyze it compared to the National Weather Service and the National Hurricane Center. It's beyond insulting compared based on what we've been dealing with from everything going on with NOAA and everything else. But they're a market research company. But more importantly, anytime someone says the provided report, unlike peer-reviewed research papers, that should be a huge red flag. Here's the thing about meteorology, and let's let's zoom on in here and let's get one on one. Any meteorologist that runs around saying that they're the best or they were the best in 2024, well, Mother Nature and life in general has a way of smacking you in the face when you start going around making those claims. There's going to be times where you have an excellent forecast. And there are meteorologists at AccuWeather who provide excellent analysis, even freely on X and other locations. And they're outstanding at what they do. But anytime you're saying that you're the best of everybody, oh, the atmosphere has a way of, I don't know, knocking down your ego. Okay. There's a reason why I never go around saying I'm the best because there's going to be days where I'm going to have excellent forecasts and then there's going to be epic busts. They will happen because you're dealing with chaos. And you, as a young meteorologist, you will have days where you feel like you could literally go out and buy a lottery ticket and win because everything just falls right into place to your thinking. Then there are days where you can't get anything right, much like baseball. There are days where you could hit every baseball and go 4 for 4 with 2 home runs. And then there's other days where you make 4 errors, you're 0 for 4, you tripped over your shoelaces, and everything went wrong. In other words, don't ever gloat when you make a good forecast. And especially don't ever put out a study that, hey, other weather nerds, which is what we are at the end of the day, know every storm and know every forecast. And don't forget when, oh, I don't know, somebody makes a forecast for a hurricane to make landfall in Florida as a category 3 and it ends up in the Yucatan Peninsula as a weak tropical storm. I'm just saying, you probably don't want to gloat about other forecasts when you make a bust like that. So the fact that they don't even release the raw data to try to make this comparison is in itself questionable. But the fact that they literally left out the forecast is well, that's a bit of a problem if you're going to try to say you're the best and you basically leave out one of the biggest busts which would have totally skewed your score if you're comparing yourself to the National Weather Service and the National Hurricane Center. So my advice, and the reason why I'm picking on this actor. There's a couple of days ago, last week, in fact, while we were away on a seminar, there was another forecasting group that is run by a non-meteorologist that they do storm chasing and whatnot. Y'all something, they're using y'all watches. And I went off the hook on that. And I said, you cannot do this. You can call it anything you want, but don't call it watches or warnings because that leads to a lot of confusion, right? So you don't want to do that. So I don't want to just pick on the little guy when the big guy, one of the biggest guys who literally hires everyone out of Penn State, um, makes statements like this. I'm not happy with them either. So, and again, sometimes I have to be careful with what I say, but this is egregious. This is bad. This is just as bad as a startup group trying to claim that they are issuing watches, even if they're paid watches. Um, that's bad, and this is bad. So, smaller group, larger group, doesn't matter. We need to have a standard of ethics here, and this is unethical. This is just stinky. It is like putrid, stinky, bad BO after a long workout type stink here. Okay, this is just bad. So let's not do this, ladies and gentlemen, because it's insulting. So definitely check up on all that and just stop making me mad. I got a feeling I'm going to be confronted about this when I go to the AMS seminar next month, which should be fun because this is what not to do. Okay, this right here is what not to do. You do not the superior accuracy, my butt. Okay, all right, let's just cut the BS here. You're not superior, especially when you start making analysis based on GFS guidance from 15 days out. Okay, so let's cut the nonsense here. Now we got that out of the way. You could tell it's going to be a fun night. Let's talk about a rainstorm on the way, and then after that, we'll talk about the seasonal forecast, which I know it may not be superior to everyone else, but it's a good shot. And we'll talk about it and I'll explain what I'm thinking here. So first, let's talk about the observations. We have a rainstorm on the way. Right now, it's just kind of misty and showers and damp and, well, just plain old uncomfortable. Not exactly the best weather conditions heading into the Memorial Day weekend, which certainly is not going to be summer like that, is for sure. We have an easterly wind, plenty of low level moisture being transported in from the Atlantic. Temperatures generally are in the 40s and 50s, and yes, it is May. It's May, and we are in the 40s and 50s. It feels more like late February or early March. The start of our new coastal low is starting to take shape. Now, you might be saying, Stephen, where is this coastal low? Well, the first signal is this strong convection here that is starting to race towards the coast and will be dropping some pretty good rainfall over the region. And our low pressure system that is starting to organize down here. Now, right now, we have a lot of scattered showers, and notice the radar isn't as filled in compared to the observations that we have with reports of rain all over the place. This is a very, very light rain, very light mist. It's not anything that is what I would call heavy at this point, but it is on the way. You can see the increase in precipitable water, and here's what is on the way that is going to be forced into the coastal plain back here to 1.5 inches. So we can establish that we're building up our moisture, and we can start to see our moisture transport starting to organize. This is a perfect example of a Miller B type storm organizing here that is going to be a lot of fun to watch. As this coastal low begins to organize, you're going to start to see the 850 millibar low really take shape here. And when that happens, it's going to drive this moisture into the coastal plain. I know someone was already asking, hey, would this lead to a widespread snowfall? One of the issues, if we were talking about this in February, in the interior, most likely. Coastal plain, that's a bit of a more of a question. And I'll tell you why. Because of the rate in which the 850 millibar low will eventually jump to the coast. In the winter, this is a much more trickier forecast because we have to see where we are in terms of the polar air mass, and whether or not we have below freezing temperatures close to the coastal plain to lead to a rapid changeover from rain to snow. Um, Without that type of information, it's hard to say. So, this structure would have the potential for a widespread winter storm, but I would not be surprised given the amount of time it takes for the 850 millibar low to form in this scenario. This would not be certainly an all snow event for the coastal plain if this was in the middle of winter. Although I'm sure many would wish it was, or wish that we'd seen this in the winter. Well, we can't guarantee that. So, we could see the evolution of our storm starting to take shape. And when you start seeing this bowing side here, that's when we start to set up an environment for the new coastal low to start to organize. Now, here we are with the upper level winds, and this is what's going to drive this whole dynamic here. This is what's going to be good. This jet streak here, this is called jet streak dynamics. So what's going to happen is that with this interaction with the subtropical jet stream and the polar jet stream, or a segment of the polar jet stream, it's going to really enhance these winds and build them up. And so what that does is that it enhances perfect jet streak dynamics over the coastal waters of New Jersey. Now we're not there yet. Right now, that's focused more towards the Ohio River Valley, but it's starting to shift towards the coast. And that's why we're starting to see this signal show up here. Okay. So as this jet stream gets itself organized, by tomorrow morning, all the focus is over the Delaware coastal waters and the New Jersey coastal waters. And that's when we start to see everything blossom and grow very nicely. So we can already start to see that. Again, here's our strong divergence in diffluence. It happens to be aligned perfectly with the heavy precipitation that we're seeing marching across Pennsylvania. So as this intensifies and shifts towards the coastal waters by tomorrow morning and tomorrow afternoon, all this strong divergence and diffluence will be focused here. And that's going to allow your low pressure system to blow up and grow and produce heavy rainfall. And at 850 millibars, you can see that it's starting to also take shape. So this is the Winds on Earth News School. Again, here's our primary low right now. Here's our secondary low right now. The process is that this will weaken, this will grow. By the way, this is like the second or third, the third primary low transition. This feature was the old primary low. This is the current primary low, and this is the future primary low. So it's kind of jumping back and forth. Very, very interesting stuff evolving here as a result of that. And so as a result, here you see the surface setup here. Your primary low pressure system still back here over the Great Lakes, but your secondary is starting to gain steam here. Now we finally closed off a low. It's a little bit elongated and stretched out, but it is starting to get its act together. And what you're going to see is that this is going to steadily strengthen and this is going to start to fade. And so you're going to get two different precipitation shields starting to set up as a result. One over the interior that has produced heavy rain already and will continue to do so, more of a moderate type rainfall. And then with the coastal low, very heavy rainfall on the coastal plain, let's say from the Delaware River on eastward. Over the interior, eastern Pennsylvania, the northern interior, that is where we start to see basically a missed opportunity for heavy, heavy rainfall, but still, a half an inch is nothing to laugh at. Um, but the reason why we don't see widespread 1 to 2 or 2 to 3 type inch rainfall is because of this transition process. Someone always misses out. So you can see this very nicely blossoming, very nicely underwater vapor satellite picture. There's a lot going on here. There is the old ghost of the upper level low that started this whole mess. Here's the current one, and here's the new one starting to get its act together very, very slowly at first. But then once this jet streak gets involved, boom. And because of all this lifting that's evolving here, you're getting a lot of this sinking air below it. So you can kind of make out where your precipitation shield is all going to focus right in this area here as the sinking air intensifies and the rising air intensifies and your precipitation shield pivots as a result. And so on the infrared satellite picture, and let's refresh this just to make sure we got the latest data here. Good. What you're going to see is, you see this colder cloud top here, this is going to start to fade and this is going to start to grow. So what will happen is that this portion of the rain shield will shift towards the mid-Atlantic. The cold cloud tops will start to grow. And for the first time in literally almost 2 years, you're going to see a nor'easter basically develop this pivot, and you're going to see the whole precipitation shield on the radar kind of stall out, pivot, and then lift northeast over the northern mid-Atlantic. Now, we have nor'easters even in May, but not this strong. So this is kind of unusual to see a storm this strong, where it's below 1,000 millibars. It's around the 993 point. That's pretty strong for this time of year. And so that's why it's kind of an impressive storm setting up here. I wanted to show this lightning point here. So this is starting to give way and fade, and you see this here. This is a sign of our cyclogenesis starting to organize. And here is the very start of our low pressure system starting to get its act together over the coastal waters. As this continues to mature, you're going to see more and more of this signal of lightning grow out here in the coastal waters as the warm sector matures and expands. So how does this look in the model guides? Well, we've been watching the model guides for several days now. Suggests this jet streak taking shape here. And so when this jet streak matures by tomorrow morning, this is going to set up all your strong lifting out here. And so you can even see in some of the upper level winds, you kind of see this stretching out here. See, it's kind of fanning out. That's going to allow for air to rapidly rise and allow for our coastal low pressure system to mature. So while that is taking shape here, you're going to see 850. You're going to see the 500 millibar PVA start to really grow and expand. So you're going to start to see strong PVA in this area right here, with a nice vorticity maximum right off the coast, right around the Delmarva Peninsula. Notice you see this negative tilt here and this divergence and diffluence right here. This is going to allow for your low pressure system to continue to mature and grow. And you're going to see, as that is taking shape, a nice healthy precipitation shield take shape. And then there's our new 500 millibar low finally maturing and taking over as the primary. Now, when this starts to evolve and finally lock in, it lifts up towards the Gulf of Maine and then just kind of meanders around Maine and the Canadian Maritimes. This is going to lead to unsettled conditions throughout the Memorial Day weekend, but not a washout. So if you have plans for a barbecue or something of that nature, definitely keep it. Yeah, have an umbrella handy, but it's not going to be a washout. Certainly not going to be warm though. I mean, we're talking about temperatures in the 50s and 60s. So if you're looking on putting on a bathing suit and getting a tan, well, no, not this weekend. I would suggest not doing that. But if you want to have a barbecue, want to spend time with friends and family, that's not a problem. I think you'll be fine with that. Just have an umbrella handy for the occasional shower that will pass through. At 850 millibars, this development is going to be much faster. You see where the 850 millibar low starts to cut off here? This process here, not the actual lifting, but the whole process of the 500 millibar and 850 millibar low developing, is going to combine to create a lot of forcing and lifting on the coastal plain. So this process here that we see will be a signal for strengthening of the precipitation shield, but also strengthening of the wind. So you're going to have a nice northeasterly wind, 15 to 20 miles per hour, gusts around 30 miles per hour. So again, a raw, ugly period of weather for tomorrow. What looking like the best lifting is going to be in the morning hours tomorrow. So the morning rush hours is going to be ugly. But this also is another clue here. Take a look at what happens to the 850 millibar low. It intensifies and then starts to weaken. Why? Because the low pressure becomes vertically stacked. Look at 48 hours at 500 millibars. See, it's right around the Gulf of Maine. And then look at 850 millibars, right over it. So what happens is that as this process takes shape, the low becomes vertically stacked, and in cold core systems, when the upper level lows and then the surface low are all under each other, that basically chokes off the engine. So the rate of intensification occurs while moving over the New Jersey coastal waters, which is why we're focusing on the heaviest rainfall on the coastal plain from southern New Jersey all the way on up into Connecticut and towards southern New England. And so that shows up very nicely here on the precipitable water value. And you can see that perfect comma signal here, right here. Okay. So this again is where we want to focus our heaviest rainfall. And right in this area, again, this is probably a little bit of convective feedback with some of the convection within this rain shield. But you can see very nicely here. And look at this. See, this is a sign of a warm seclusion. So don't be surprised if this forms a little eye while intensifying. It does not mean it's tropical. What happens is that you kind of get this warm pocket within the cold core system. Um, but this signal usually shows up pretty nicely, but it collapses just as quickly. So this usually is a sign that, hey, the whole storm has maximized. It has reached its peak intensity. It has become vertically stacked. You get this warm seclusion. Then it starts to fall apart as the whole process pretty much has reached its peak mixing point. Here we are at 700 millibars with the relative humidity. I just want to show as we get through the weekend, we see a lot more dry air mix in. So again, just to kind of show that we're not looking at a complete washout for the Memorial Day weekend as we are dealing with a lot of dry air. We also have a lot of cold air aloft, and this is why through the weekend it's going to remain unsettled because you have 850 millibar temperatures between 0 and 3 degrees Celsius, and you have surface temperatures in the 50s and 60s. That allows for rising motion in the atmosphere, and that's why we have to watch out for those isolated showers, especially on Saturday afternoon, Sunday afternoon, and Monday afternoon. So over the next 90 hours, let's take a look at how it looks on the European, and then we'll take a look at the mesoscale models, the NAM and the HRR. On the European, well, there is our heavy rainfall marching in. It develops, focuses on the coastal plain. Watch the surface flow. Goes from 1,002 millibars to 998, 996, 995, bottoms out at around 993. And then at this point, this is where it becomes vertically stacked. So during this whole time period, while lifting up through the New Jersey coastal waters, that's why we're going to be going through steady intensification, which is why the precipitation shield is going to be so strong. And then once it gets into the Gulf of Maine, it steadily starts to weaken and collapse. And that's why, as we move on through the rest of the weekend, we have pesky showers, but not a washout, just annoyance. That's the best way to describe it. And so that's what we're seeing here. This is more driven. Notice during the overnight hours, we see less. Afternoon hours, more. Why? Because we have instability in the atmosphere. So you get these pesky showers rotating on through. On the NAM guidance, you can see that heavy rainfall organizing. A little bit of convective feedback here, but not too bad. So you kind of get the whole evolution of the storm here. And then after that, just a lot of pesky. Again, notice this isn't a washout on Saturday. Even on Friday, it's not too bad. Just a pesky shower here and there, just to keep an eye on it. And then again, on the HRR, let me update this real fast. Sorry about that. Again, over the next 16 hours, there is our heavy rain on the coast. That's where it's focused the most. And then it pushes out. Again, notice over the interior, it's not as intense. It's more scattered in nature, but still a wet period of weather. So the forecast, bless you, the forecast that we're going for here is, again, this has been up for premium members for several days now. I know it's not that we are the best in the world. I won't hire a PR firm, I promise, to push this and to bash other forecasters, but I will say I'm pretty happy with the forecast at this point for this storm. We'll see how it pans out, and then maybe we'll hype it up or something. I don't know. But looking at 1.5 to 2.5 inches of rain on the coastal plain, Philadelphia, New York to Boston. Hey, look, we're breaking our drought. I know everyone wants to get rid of this rainfall because, hey, I can't do my stuff outside. But for the love of God, we at least not going to be enhancing our fire danger. Because I'd rather deal with some wet weekends than a wildfire. Thank you very much. So we're getting the rainfall. We're breaking the drought. This is great news, even if you can't get a tan. I know, but trust me, it's good news. And then further over the interior, half an inch to an inch and a half of rain is expected. So that's our storm. We'll get to your questions on the storm in just a moment. But I also want to talk about the summer forecast and tropical. So let's dive into that real fast. Now, oh yeah, by the way, as you can see for the weekend, unsettled, but not a washout. So let's get into the summer forecast. The basis of the summer forecast is basically this: tropical forcing is going to be haywire. Okay, we don't have El Nino, we don't have La Nina. There is no sign of either developing. We'll talk about that in a second. So the primary forcing mechanism that I'm watching here, one is the stratosphere and the other is the SOI. So in terms of the stratosphere, what I'm watching for is where do these cold pockets set up? And we're starting to see more and more focus over the Western Atlantic and over North America. The more we see that, the more it enhances the 500 millibar heights and the warmer our temperatures are going to be. So I see the support here for us to have some very toasty type of atmospheric air masses over Eastern North America. Okay, so that is the base here. Okay, then the question is, where do these ridge axes set up based on the way that our polar jet stream and subtropical jet stream evolved during the warm seasons and what forcing mechanisms we have? Well, we know as we look at the guidance here, hey, we have a lot of cold pockets here in the stratosphere evolving. So this is going to lead to some pretty robust ridges. But we also have changes with the QBO. Now, I've been talking about the QBO for some time now. I've been saying, hey, watch out. Remember last winter, I was saying, hey, the QBO is positive, but it's weakening, which increases the potential for storms and at the very least opens up the potential for high latitude blocking. When the QBO goes easterly negative, that is when high latitude blocking has a higher potential to be sustained. Okay. So we're moving towards a support for more sustained high latitude blocking as we move on through the summer and as we move into the fall and winter. We're not going to talk about the fall and winter, but it kind of gives you a little bit of preview where we're going here. The reason why this is important to me in the summer is that if we get a sustained negative NAO, and remember, you have to displace it northward because it is summer, it helps to enhance and support a more sustained Western Atlantic ridge, a Bermuda high, shall we say. Okay, and as you all know, Bermuda highs and summer leads to humid conditions. So, this is a signal I've been watching very carefully. I've been bringing it up to premium members, so we're bringing it up tonight because it is an important factor that I'm going to be watching very carefully evolving. In the meantime, take a look at the tropics. It is important to make sure that we don't have any type of surprises here. There was some thought on social media, of course, that La Nina might make a comeback because we have a cold neutral. Barely. So what you want to do is take a look at the subsurface. Is there anything that's going to support that? Not really. No. Our cold pools are basically fading. We have a lot of warm water. There is no sign of an El Nino either because you need a gradient to develop the El Nino circulation. The gradient is flipped or barely showing up. So no, there is no sign of an El Nino, La Nina. There's a La Nada. Okay, that's what it is. It's La Nada. It's zero. My Spanish teacher would be very happy. I used a word that's in Spanish that well, I don't even know if it is Spanish, but you get the point here. Not a lot of forcing in terms of tropical forcing. So we can eliminate that. The MJO has been in the circle of death forever. Right? It kind of peaks in at one or two phases for like a minute, but then it falls away. So it's not enough to really influence it. So what I've been keeping an eye on is the SOI and the trends for the most part. The trend is going negative, which admittingly With a negative SOI, it increases El Nino like signals. But this is still very weak, and we have a long way to go before we can actually say this is El Nino signal. Okay. But in terms of the trends here, we're definitely gradually going towards a negative state. Our monthly values are very weakly negative. I would call this like a weak neutral, okay? Weak negative neutral. Our seasonal is still positive, so it's kind of a muted effect. But I'm not worried about the numbers. I'm looking at the trends. And the trends suggest we're seeing more daily negative contributions. And when we have negative contributions in the daily numbers, that is usually a sign for more storms. So we're moving towards a trend of an SOI negative. We're moving towards a trend of an easterly QBO. We're moving towards a trend of a colder stratospheric environment. You put these together and you tend to get a trough around the Aleutians and a trough around the Great Lakes and the Ohio River Valley down to the Tennessee River Valley. So I like the idea of the trough setting up in that region, and then the Western Atlantic Ridge establishing itself and becoming strongest over around Bermuda and the Western Atlantic, and kind of extending at times into the East Coast, which means cold fronts approach, but then they die. Okay, and that leads to scattered showers and thunderstorms and temperatures in the 80s and 90s and high humidity. And me being very glad that we have central air now, because that would have been horrible in the apartment. So, what this looks like in the model guidance here, and again, you never take this verbatim, but you look at the trends here. What are the trends suggesting here? As you move all the way into early July, again, you don't take this verbatim, but you kind of get this weakness trough here constantly showing up around the Aleutians. But again, it's kind of muted because it is summer. You're going to get this weakness on the west coast here. So you got a nice ridge over the plains and a nice ridge here trying to build over the western Atlantic here. You got to have this weakness signal somewhere between the Appalachian Mountains and the East Coast here. So in this setup here, basically get a lot back and forth with the Western Atlantic Ridge. Cold fronts try to push through, but they basically fail. When you take a look at the operational guidance, and again, you never take any of this verbatim, but again, when you watch the trends, what I'm seeing here as we move on through this time period is more and more support for building heights and stronger 500 millibar heights over the Western Atlantic. So again, our polar jet stream starts to give way as it does during the summer, and you start to get this signal showing up more and more as we move forward. Again, we're not taking this verbatim. What we're doing here is looking at the trends evolving here. So you have this trend of a nice ridge here. You have a trend of our polar jet stream dropping in here and then producing a weakness here. So when you get this weakness here, then things can get interesting. So at times you'll get the ridge to extend and connect. Other times it'll be separated and you'll kind of have this conduit of potential moisture. Notice what I'm doing here with that moisture. Yep, we're going to have to keep an eye on that and look at what we're doing here. So we want to watch this area right here in terms of our tropical forecast. So we have this evolution, and again, you can see it at 850 millibars, the growth of our tropical air mass after the initial cool phase in May. And you can see as we move into June, as we move towards June and into June, the expansion of our tropical air mass starts to grow. We start to push back towards more near normal temperatures as we start June. And yeah, you'll have a better chance to go get your tan. So trust me, things will get better. I don't think we stick with this rainy type weather pattern with the nor'easters for very long. I think it's just kind of a conduit to shift from our earlier spring weather pattern to our summer pattern. And this process that we're dealing with is part of that step down. In terms of tropical potential, this is not like last year where the Atlantic was literally on fire. It's basically averaging near normal. I wouldn't call this below normal cool, but nothing that is extravagant. We are seeing very warm sea surface temperatures here in the Western Atlantic, Hint, hint, that's probably where we're going to start to see a lot of storms try to pop up. But other than that, when I take a look at the signals here in the Atlantic, again, the Gulf of Mexico is not really all that impressive. Very warm waters here over the Eastern Gulf. We've been seeing that a lot over the past couple of years. But the focus appears to be here a lot. And that kind of has me a little concerned. So when I dive into the forecast here, I've been having this out for several days now, over 2 weeks at this point. So this is basically the average, and this is the forecast. So not anything extravagant. Again, the only error I could see with this in terms of the number of storms is if we start to go crazy with the subtropical storms I've tried to get named here. But other than that, I think that our average 14 will probably be around 15, seven hurricanes, three major. So as average as you could possibly get. I don't see anything that would support something that is well above normal. But why might it seem well above normal, especially with news coverage? Well, I'm expecting well, I'm concerned about the southeast coast. And this year we're pushing that moderate threat. Normally I have the low threat going all the way down through New Jersey. This year, moderate. Not exactly a direct hit, but some remnant storms, or like let's say a hurricane transition to a tropical storm, lifting northward, that type of thing. Excuse me. I can see that evolving quite a bit. Gulf Coast, I'm going to keep at moderate, not high this year, because I think we're going to see a lot of storms cutting up. And keep an eye on the Bahamas. Whatever develops north of the Greater Antilles is something we're going to have to really keep an eye on. And don't be surprised we get some tropical systems pop off of some stalled cold fronts sitting out here trying to make a run for the southeast coast as well. Time for coffee. So that's everything I have for today. Now it's time to answer your questions. And boy, we covered a lot, didn't we? So let's see. No wonder why my voice is getting a little dry. All right. So let's see what. Wow, that's pretty good. All right. So let's dive in. By the way, it's 1-1 for the Mets. They haven't lost, but Hendricks is really good. So we'll see. That's a picture I would have definitely paid for. So, Card has a bunch of questions. Let's see. What will it be like tomorrow morning between 7 and 9 a.m. or so at Newark Airport? Oh, Newark. Get yourself some snacks and some rosary beads. You're going to need it. I would say it's heavy rain. It's going to be ugly. I'm sorry to say. Uh, it's just going to be raw out, and expect delays, lots of delays. Even on a good day, there's delays, but tomorrow, definitely. Mid 50s for highs, third week of May is frigid. In December, we would be calling this the tropical rainforest Christmas. In May, it's cold. It's a cold November rain. Absolutely. Absolutely. Sunspot activity has fallen off the cliff the past couple of weeks. Yes, it has, and something I'm watching very carefully. Meanwhile, the Highland Card Jekyll phase of the sun with the big coronal hole is back for another go round. Yeah, this is the third time, and it's pretty unusual. Um, Again, there's a lot with the sun that we give ourselves a sense of understanding, but there's a lot we don't know. So it's very interesting. I consider myself a student, not an expert on solar activity. So I'm learning something new every day, and I could say with complete honesty, what's going on with the sun is getting very interesting. We'll see. We might be moving towards a blank sun much faster than I thought we were going to see it. So we'll see how that takes place. Also looking at 250 millibars subtropical jet is still going odd. This is due to the MJO phase, the water vapor in the atmosphere, or a combo of both. I think it's because they're changing SOI. Excuse me. We can't really attribute it to MJO because it's as neutral as you can get. The water vapor in the stratosphere, not really as strong of an influence, but still an influence. But I can't really connect it to the subtropical jet stream. But I think it has more to do with the SOI making its change gradually. No matter what you do, I think it is essential that people have some training in basic business and basic financial planning. Absolutely. That was my point. And then let's see. To be blunt, AccuWeather's representation of the study is misleading, if not outright fraud, intending to drive people to purchase their service. I mean, look, I have to be careful here because I don't want to be sued or anything. But let's just say I probably would not be going around saying I'm the best ever, and certainly wouldn't make it as. Um, I never want to bash the National Weather Service or the forecasters there. Trust me. Someone should remind them you'd have no data without them, right? So, yeah, cute. Then there'll be in May, not in January or February, when it would have been doing some good. Well, I mean, it's still doing good. It's going to kill all droughts, so that's good. So basically, there's a chance of stray showers along the Garden State Parkway for Atlantic City on Saturday. Yeah, not a washout, but watch out for a few pesky showers. And those showers will be capable of a brief heavy downpour from time to time. Impressively cold and 50 millibar temperatures given the sun angle this week, same as the third week of July. Yeah, it is pretty impressive. I can guarantee that. And Rob Allen says, not going to lie, I don't like your summer forecast. Negative NAO war upper level low pattern that's forming. I smell serious tropical trouble if anything gets to the Bahamas. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say the S word. You all know what I'm talking about. But I will say that this is going to be a summer and fall, early fall, where I'm going to have to be on my toes. I'm not going to be able to enjoy my Mets World Series as much because I'm going to be tracking so many storms. But that's okay because I'm here for you. Even when I miss out on a Mets game, I am here for you. By the way, the Mets have 2-1, looking to score. They got to win this game. Let's go. All right. So large parts of the Pacific look like they are above average as well. Absolutely. There's been a lot of warm water in the northern Pacific, which I think is going to drive a lot of your negative EPO patterns. Also, what is the impact, if any, of the real warm blob off the east coast of Europe? Not really a direct impact for us, but it will make some interesting weather patterns for Spain and Portugal. Not so much for us. It will be interesting to see if we get any tropical systems get out that way, if they re-intensify while heading towards those locations. Incoming flight 8:30 scheduled arrival. Good luck. Luckily, the earliest flight was booked because the later regular flight for the trip was the one of the flights just canceled with late traffic reduction at Newark. Wow, man. Yeah, have a lot of snacks and may the force be with you. There you go. Let's see here. What do we have on YouTube? We have a lot of questions. Well, I answered that one. Will the Yankees play tomorrow at 12:35? Probably not. I mean, they'll try, but it's not looking good. If the Earth were to cool, wouldn't we notice strange jet stream patterns like what we're seeing this May? Now that is an interesting question. Okay, so let's think about this here. It depends on how the Earth cooled. Again, a lot of people, when they think the Earth is cool or warming, that it's some sort of static system that it all does so evenly. So part of this would be dependent on where does it start to cool, how does it start to cool, what impacts does it happen more towards the tropics or is this a polar region and what time of year, and also whether or not we're dealing with stratospheric cooling or stratospheric warming. So in terms of the way it cools, if we're looking at the troposphere and like, hey, we're cooling up the troposphere, then we'd probably see a lot of warming in the stratosphere. We're not really seeing that. We're seeing cooling in the stratosphere. The cooling in the stratosphere is something that, well, I think that it would go against the idea of a cooling Earth. So I don't see any sign of a cooling Earth. But if that was to happen, what we would see would be massive stratospheric warming taking shape, which would lead to a reduction in 500 millibar heights, which would lead to a shift southward of the polar and subtropical jet streams, and also stronger polar air masses at the lower levels. So that's what we would probably see. What would drive that? Something like volcanic activity. Like if we had a major catastrophic volcanic eruption, like I don't know, something really big, then yeah, you'd see that cooling. But luckily, I don't see that happening anytime soon. Fingers crossed. Yeah. Um, can we now say the drought is over? Almost. We're definitely moving away from it, and this type of rainfall is going to free us up from to support synoptic. We are not at the point of replacing where we were at last spring, but we've made a huge cut, which is important. So I think that we're out of the drought pattern, but not out of the drought influences yet. But our water table is recovering. Just ask my backyard. We actually have stuff growing again, so that's great. Did we have any storms like this last winter? Not like that. Honestly, this is why I'm kind of excited about it because we haven't had something like this in quite some time. Love your work and channel. Thank you, Rudy. I really appreciate it. Rudy Scott. Scooty. I'm so bad. You know what this is? I am pushing myself after. Normally, after 8 o'clock, I'm just sitting around watching Columbo or something like that, or watching the Mets and not thinking. So normally, I do apologize. I'm really good at butchering everyone's names. Um, do we have any questions on X or on Facebook? We did. Check again. Second to fight with Facebook. As always. Let's see here. Car service does pick up. In the meantime, I'm looking to see premium. Have taken some time away from the winter forecast. Is there anything significant that stands out to you where you thought something was going to occur that didn't? I was surprised that the timing still so off. It feels like winter timing has been horrible the last 5 years. I was really happy with the winter forecast last year. The year before, I was not happy with it. There were some factors, and the year before that, I really wasn't happy with it. Um, but last year, I was happy with it because I think I finally figured out how the water vapor in the stratosphere is screwing with things in the weather pattern. By the way, it's bases loaded with nobody out. They got to score, and Beatty's hitting. So for God's sakes, swing the bat. You cannot score if you do not swing the bat. Just saying. But we'll see. I I like the way that the winter forecast evolved because I said I wasn't expecting any type of major storms or anything of that nature. the the struggle I think this year is going to be to figure out how the QBO is impacting the high latitude blocking and what high latitude blocking it is impacting and influencing. Is it going to lock up the Pacific or the Atlantic or both? I don't know yet, but that's going to be the struggle. And then the other struggle will be what exactly are we dealing with in terms of tropical forcing? That is going to be right now setting up to be a nightmare. Because if it's all driven by the MJO, well, good luck with anything beyond 15 days in terms of a seasonal forecast, because that is going to be an absolute nightmare. Knicks up 48-45, second quarter, game one, Eastern Conference Finals. Well, good luck, Knicks. You know, every time I hear the Knicks, I'm sorry, but I just think of Vanilla Ice and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Because in the 90s, they kept on saying, go New York, go New York, go. And then you had the Go Ninjas, Go Ninjas, go. And so I always combine the two. So I always consider the Knicks to be the basically New York version of the Ninja Turtles. And Beatty got a base hit. Base is clearing. God, that guy's got to play all the time. This is great. We scored 2 runs. So right now we will have a parade. We'll have a parade at Citi Field because we have scored 2 runs and we are actually beating Boston. I don't know. Hey, look, I'm a Mets fan. Shoot me. Anything on Facebook or anything? Nothing. Nothing. All right. Well, hey, it's got to 8:54. But okay. I did see one more thing coming up. Okay. YouTube, but let me see here. Will be getting some rainstorms like this anymore? I don't want to. You know what? No, we're not going to see something like this, like what we're seeing with the low pressure system and all that stuff. You know what we're going to see? Tropical influence, remnant storms. I think that is going to be the theme in the summer. Stalling cold fronts, remnant low pressure systems, heavy rain, flooding. Those are the themes. And when we're not seeing that, humid, pesky, ugly weather. The type of weather where, hey, look, for weight loss, it's going to be great. I'm going to be doing my cut and I won't have to do a lot of working out because I'll be sweating to death because it's going to be 89 with a dew point in the 70s and I'm going to be feeling like it's 96 or 97. And you know that is not good for me. But some people, for some reason, some people like that. They get all excited about that. I think that's horrendous. Give me cold weather. I can layer with cold weather. You know, humidity. It's not like I could walk around naked. That'd be bad, right? So, yeah, I'm not a big fan. That was beautiful. Last 2 days, absolutely. It was beautiful weather. Absolutely. So let's see here. Is there anything else that we got? I think I knocked out all the questions I was looking for. Will the stalling cold fronts reduce the chance of severe weather rather than the fronts pushing through more? Actually, no. It would actually enhance the severe weather. I'm going to tell you why. So the cold fronts are stalling out, but you're also going to have mesoscale boundaries all over the place. And you're also going to have sea breeze fronts interacting with a lot of low level moisture and a lot of high precipitable water values. The high precipitable water values are going to enhance the friction in the atmosphere. You combine that with the urban heat island effect that we've been seeing more and more enhanced on the I-95 corridor as these people keep on building all these homes. That is going to enhance low level circulation, mesoscale lows. Do not be surprised if we have a summer with a lot of, let's say, false positives, which I never ever bash the National Weather Service for this because you don't want to be the person that says, we're not going to warn it and it actually ends up being a weak tornado. So I think we're going to see a lot of mesoscale low pressure systems and thunderstorms with severe weather, hail, and yes, those isolated tornadoes are going to be a pain in the neck to forecast for. But when you have the high precipitable water values this summer, you're also going to have thunderstorms capable of frequent vivid lightning, very heavy torrential downpours, so there's your flash flooding. And with all that low level moisture, downburst wind gusts will push your wind gusts over 55 miles per hour, and thus severe thunderstorms. So I think that we covered everything for tonight. It is 8:57, and I am going to enjoy. Looks like the Mets might actually win this game. They learned how to hit again. Look at that. So we covered a lot. I got my thoughts out about companies doing crazy things, whether it's y'all or whether it's AccuWeather. Let's not bash or try to take over jobs that the National Weather Service does. We shouldn't be issuing watches, and we shouldn't be claiming we're the greatest forecaster of all time. Because you're not. You're not. Stop it. You're not. Okay? And we went over the storms, we went over the hurricane forecast, we went over the summer forecast. I think we covered a lot. But as always, I couldn't do it without you. So I really, really want to thank you for joining this live chat and helping out with all of this information and on X and YouTube and everywhere else. And of course, thank you, Susan, for helping out. As always, in the meantime, what? Well, I love you. In the meantime, stay safe out there.